What if I told you that one moment of human impatience changed the course of history forever? That a single decision made in desperation would birth nations, spark conflicts that still echo today, and reveal profound truths about God's grace? This is the story of Ishmael, not just Abraham's firstborn son, but a man whose life teaches us about rejection, survival, and divine purpose. Stay with me for the next 10 minutes as we uncover a biblical narrative that's more relevant to your life than you might think. Today, we're diving deep into one of the Bible's most complex family stories, the account of Ishmael, found primarily in Genesis chapters 16 and 21. This isn't just ancient history. It's a mirror that reflects our own struggles with faith, family dynamics, and finding our place in God's plan. Our story begins with Abraham and Sarah, then called Abram and Sarai. God had promised Abraham that he would become the father of many nations, that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars. But there was one problem. Sarah was barren, and both she and Abraham were advancing in years. After 10 years of waiting, Sarah's faith wavered. In ancient Near Eastern culture, a barren wife could give her servant to her husband to bear children on her behalf. Sarah owned an Egyptian servant named Hagar, likely acquired during their sojourn in Egypt. In a moment that would echo through millennia, Sarah said to Abraham, "Go into my servant. It may be that I shall obtain children by her." Abraham listened to Sarah's voice, and Hagar conceived. But success bred contempt. Once pregnant, Hagar began to look down on her barren mistress. The Hebrew text suggests she literally despised Sarah. Imagine the household tension, the pregnant servant girl suddenly feeling superior to the woman who owned her. Sarah's response was swift and harsh. She complained to Abraham, saying, "May the wrong done to me be on you." Abraham, perhaps wanting to avoid conflict, essentially washed his hands of the situation. "Behold, your servant is in your power. Do to her as you please." What followed was abuse so severe that Hagar fled into the wilderness, a pregnant woman, alone, with nowhere to go. This wasn't just a family squabble, this was a life or death situation. But here's where the story takes a remarkable turn. In the wilderness, by a spring of water, the angel of the Lord found Hagar. This divine messenger didn't scold her for running away or command her to accept her fate. Instead, he asked her a simple question. "Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going?" God's message to Hagar was both challenging and comforting. Yes, she must return and submit to Sarah, but God had seen her affliction. He promised that her son would become a great nation. She was to name him Ishmael, meaning God hears, because God had heard her cry of distress. Hagar gave God a name that appears nowhere else in Scripture, El Roi, the God who sees me. She became the first person in the Bible to give God a name, and the only person to see God and live to tell about it. Hagar returned, and Ishmael was born when Abraham was 86 years old. For 13 years, Ishmael was Abraham's only son and heir. Can you imagine the bond that formed? Abraham loved this boy, raised him, taught him, and likely assumed he was the fulfillment of God's promise. The text tells us little about these years, but we can infer they were good ones. Ishmael grew up in Abraham's household, learning the ways of his father's God, experiencing the blessings that came with being Abraham's son. Then, when Abraham was 99 and Sarah was 89, God reaffirmed his covenant and promised that Sarah herself would bear a son. Abraham's response reveals his heart. He fell on his face and laughed, not in faith, but in disbelief. His prayer was telling, "Oh, that Ishmael might live before you." God's response was both a no and a yes. No, Ishmael would not be the covenant heir. That honor belonged to Isaac, yet to be born. But yes, God had heard Abraham's prayer for Ishmael. He too would be blessed, become the father of 12 princes, and grow into a great nation. Isaac was born, and at his weaning celebration, probably when he was around 3 years old, Sarah saw something that ignited her anger. Ishmael was laughing or mocking. The Hebrew word can mean anything from innocent play to cruel mockery. Sarah's demand was harsh and final. Cast out this slave woman with her son, for the son of this slave woman shall not be heir with my son Isaac. This demand greatly distressed Abraham. The Hebrew literally says it was very evil in his eyes. This was his son we're talking about, a boy he'd raised for about 17 years. But God confirmed Sarah's demand. Isaac would indeed be Abraham's heir, but Ishmael too would become a nation because he was Abraham's offspring. Early the next morning, perhaps before his resolve could weaken, Abraham gave Hagar bread and water and sent her away with Ishmael. They wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba until the water ran out. Believing her son was about to die, Hagar placed him under a bush and sat down about a bowshot away, saying, "Let me not look on the death of the child." Both mother and son wept. Then God intervened again. The angel of God called to Hagar from heaven, "What troubles you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is." God opened her eyes to see a well of water nearby. The text then tells us, "And God was with the boy, and he grew up. He lived in the wilderness and became an expert with the bow. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt." The story of Ishmael reminds us that God's love extends beyond our understanding of his plans. While Isaac carried the covenant promise, Ishmael carried God's blessing into the wilderness and became the father of a great nation, traditionally understood to be the Arab peoples. This ancient story speaks to anyone who has ever felt like the outsider, the one who didn't quite fit the expected mold, or the person whose path took an unexpected turn. Lesson 1. God sees and hears our pain. Just as God saw Hagar in her distress and heard Ishmael's cry, he sees you in your moments of rejection and abandonment. You are not invisible to God, no matter how forgotten you feel by people. Lesson 2. Human impatience can create long-term consequences. Sarah and Abraham's decision to help God fulfill his promise through Hagar created family conflict that lasted generations. Sometimes our well-intentioned shortcuts create more problems than solutions. Lesson 3. God can work through our mistakes. Even though Ishmael wasn't born according to God's original plan, God still blessed him and made him into a great nation. Our mistakes don't disqualify us from God's purposes. Lesson 4. Everyone has a place in God's plan. Ishmael wasn't the covenant heir, but he still had a divine destiny. You don't have to be the chosen one to be chosen by God for something significant. Lesson 5. Rejection by people doesn't equal rejection by God. Ishmael was sent away from Abraham's household, but God never abandoned him. Human rejection often redirects us toward God's alternative plan for our lives. God sees you, God hears you, and God has a plan for you. If this video has encouraged you, please like it and subscribe for more biblical insights. Share in the comments. How has God shown up for you in your wilderness moments? I'd love to hear your story. Until next time, remember, you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved by the God of Abraham, Isaac, and yes, Ishmael too.